Welcome to Common Ground with Corrine Rios. Today, we're talking about something that may sound procedural or technical at first glance, but actually impacts transparency, accountability, public trust, and the ability of ordinary citizens to raise concerns about elected officials. Sandoval County in New Mexico is currently considering major changes to its ethics ordinance. And when I say major changes, I do not mean small wording cleanups. This proposal would significantly change how complaints are filed, how they are screened, who decides whether they move forward, how public the complaints become, and how involved the ethics board is during the process. And for citizens who want to follow this issue more closely, approval of the proposed ethics ordinance changes is expected to be considered by the Sandoval County Commissioners on June 10th at 6 p.m. So this conversation is not hypothetical. These are real structural changes currently being discussed at the county level that could significantly affect how the ethics complaints are handled, who has authority during the process, and how much involvement the ethics board itself has before complaints can be dismissed. And I think that makes it even more important for citizens to understand how the current system works and what actually is being proposed to change. And that's why we're doing this video. Now, before I get into the proposed changes themselves, I want to share why this topic is personally caught my attention. Because honestly, before going through an experience like this myself, I probably would not have paid much attention to ethics procedures. Most people don't until suddenly you find yourself inside the process like I did. In 2025, I filed an ethics complaint in Rio Rancho. Now, this episode is not about relitigating that complaint, attacking individuals, or claiming that every complaint filed is automatically valid. Every elected official deserves due process. But guess what? So do citizens. But going through that process made me start paying attention to how ethics systems actually function behind the scenes. What struck me was not simply whether people agreed or disagreed with the complaint itself. What struck me was the structure of the process itself. And that experience caused me to start asking broader questions, like how much authority should one person have before a complaint ever reaches a full ethics board? How transparent should the process be? And who even knows how many complaints are actually filed if only certain complaints ever become public? That's why this Sandoval County proposal caught my attention, because it raises larger questions about transparency, checks and balances, due process, gatekeeping, authority, and public trust in government systems. And I think those are conversations worth having, regardless of political party. My complaint that I filed in 2025 with the city of Rio Rancho was about process and whether certain actions of the elected officials complied with the city's ethics and procedural standard. I filed the complaint believing the concerns deserved review through the ethics system. And I'm going to just share with you what happened and why I filed. In 2025, April 24, 2025, and May 8th, 2025, there was an ordinance proposed to our city council, Ordinance 013, and it was about opting in to state elections in November. Right now, Rio Rancho does their municipal elections in March. And so we have to pay for those elections, the city. But you can opt in, cities can opt in to do them at the same time as the state in November. And I believe the county will then pick up the cost because the county has elections in November. So we'll just piggyback on them and save us some money. So that was the ordinance, Ordinance 13. But in the ordinance and in opting into the state elections, three very important things were going to happen. Voter ID that we have in Rio Rancho, that was voter approved in 2012, would have been unenforceable because at the state level, we do not have state required voter ID for elections. So that would go away if we opted into the November elections. Also, in Ordinance 13, the current mayor and all 6 city councilors would have their current term extended by 21 months. Okay, that's right. This ordinance would have extended their terms by 21 months. That's a financial benefit of money and of power. Okay. And so for both the first reading on April 24th and the second reading, May 8th, Mayor Hull recused himself from even listening to the ordinance and the discussion. The mayor doesn't vote unless there's a tie or 6 or less councilors. So the mayor in our city doesn't really vote on things unless there's a tie. So, but he recused himself because he said he didn't want it to be perceived as a conflict of interest. And why would it be a conflict of interest? Why would people think it's a conflict of interest? Because his term that was going to expire or be up for re-election in March 2026 would have been extended by 21 months. That means there wouldn't have been an election until November 2028. I think it's 2028. Yeah, 2028. I think, yeah. So even the mayor understood that there could be a conflict of interest. And when we rallied a lot of people to go to the meeting on May 8th, there was a resident who said this is a conflict of interest because all the city councilors, 6 of them, were going to vote to extend their own term. Seems like a conflict of interest to me. So anyway, that happened on May 8th. That ordinance was a tie and it failed because Mayor Hull had recused himself. But then I kept thinking, and it's May, June, July, August, September, October, and it still bothered me. And I was doing some other things at that time. And in November, I put in a complaint with the ethics panel here in Rio Rancho because I just thought that was wrong. To vote for a financial benefit for yourself was wrong. So I filed the complaint and I sent it according to the procedures on the website. Filled out the form and sent it to Josh Rubin, who is the city attorney, like the rules said to. So I forwarded it to Josh Rubin, and then he forwarded it to the ethics official. And I asked him some questions. How long would it take? Who is this ethics official? I don't know if I asked him who hires this person. Where does this person come from? He gave me the name of the person. And I think it was, what date is this? They finally responded on January 2nd, 2026. And this one person, this ethics official, said that my claim was unsubstantiated. I'm going to read it to you here real quick because I do have it. The complaint alleges that the city councilors who participated in discussion and voted on Ordinance 13 violated the City of Rio Rancho Code of Conduct. And we have a code of conduct, and it actually says you cannot vote on things. You have to recuse yourself. And you know what? We have a lot of city councilors. I can think off the top of my head, Nicole List, when we talk about the firefighters, she recuses herself. Not because she's a firefighter, but because she has family, I guess, who are in the firefighting, who are a firefighter. I don't know. But that's our code of conduct. If it looks like there's going to be some conflict of interest, you have to, 1, disclose it and recuse yourself. That's what it says. The complaint alleges that by voting on a proposed ordinance, each city councilor was provided with direct personal and financial benefit, and the act constituted a conflict of interest. I agree with that. But this one person said that they were supposed to vote on these ordinances according to state law. You know, I think you're supposed to vote on ordinances, but not when you benefit directly. So this one person went on to say that the complaint is unsubstantiated claim under this ordinance, basically saying that they were okay to vote for a personal benefit for themselves. I still believe it was wrong, but it kind of started having me ask questions like, really, one person gets to be the gatekeeper, the judge, and the jury? Who hires this person? Is this person paid or volunteer? And so all these questions just kept floating through my mind that I just didn't think was right. Of course, I didn't get to take this any further because then I ran for mayor. I lost, but I ran for mayor. But this sticks out to me. This just sticks out to me as not being right. We have an ethics panel here in Rio Rancho, but unless that one person says it's substantiated, nothing gets to the panel, to the 3-member panel. Nothing gets to the panel. And what's even more disturbing is that one person can say 100 claims are unsubstantiated, and those don't get recorded and brought to the governing body. So only ethics claims that are substantiated and go to the ethics panel get reported and recorded and are public information. That just seems wrong to me. So that's why this is very interesting to me. So now again, that's my story. And I just want to be very clear. I'm not saying that every complaint filed is automatically valid. And I'm not saying elected officials should not have protections against frivolous accusations. Due process matters. But what surprised me was how the process itself operated. The complaint first went to the contract ethics official. And according to the process, that official investigates and determines whether the complaint is substantiated or unsubstantiated. Ultimately, I was told my complaint was unsubstantiated. Now, what I think is fascinating is that this ethics officer, I gave my evidence, she didn't even call me and ask questions. So what kind of an investigation did she even do? She said the documents that she reviewed was the complaint, the sworn statement from me, the minutes of the governing body for April 24th and May 8th, the draft of the ordinance, municipal offer, and she listed a bunch of other things. But she didn't call me. She didn't call me to ask questions. It doesn't say over here if she called and asked anybody else anything. So she concluded that it was unsubstantiated. But how thorough was her investigation anyway? I don't even know. And neither does the governing body know or people. And according to the Rio Rancho flow chart of the ethics official determines a complaint is substantiated, the process can stop. The process stopped for me. The complaint never went to the ethics panel. The governing body may never publicly hear about the complaint, but I'm sure they do because they talk in City Hall. And the public itself may never know the complaint existed. That realization was what really caught my attention because it made me begin asking bigger questions. How many complaints get screened out before reaching a panel? Should one official have that much gatekeeping authority? Should the ethics board itself review complaints? The board has 3 people. And how do governments balance protecting officials from frivolous complaints with maintaining transparency and public confidence in the process itself? Those are the questions that led me to start studying how ethics systems are structured, not just in Rio Rancho, but now also in Sandoval County. And that experience is what led me to start paying attention, not just to Rio Rancho's ethics process, but also to the proposed changes now being discussed in Sandoval County. So I just want to talk about now how the current Sandoval County process we're going to look at the current Sandoval County ethics process is structured. Under the current Sandoval County system, complaints are filed with the contract compliance officer, just like in Rio Rancho. There is still an initial review process, but importantly, according to the current Sandoval County flowchart, the ethics board itself becomes involved before final determinations are reached. And that is a very important distinction. Under the current structure, the ethics board participates through preliminary hearings, investigations, evidentiary hearings, findings, settlement process, and appeals. So structurally, the current Sandoval County system appears much more board-centered, layered, and checks and balances oriented. In other words, multiple people and multiple procedural stages are involved before final decisions are reached. Some people may view that as providing more checks and balances because authority is spread across multiple participants, multiple viewpoints, and multiple procedural stages. Now, compare that to the Rio Rancho process. In Rio Rancho, the ethics panel generally does not become involved unless the ethics official first determines the complaint is substantiated. That means one ethics official acts as the significant gatekeeper before the panel ever sees the complaint, if they even see the complaint. Another question citizens may reasonably ask is, who selects the ethics official in the first place? Is this person elected, appointed, volunteering, or hired? Because that matters when we talk about independence and public trust. Under the proposed Sandoval County amendment, the contract compliance officer would be retained by the county manager. So while the ordinance attempts to create independence or being streamlined, as they're saying, by requiring the officer to be an attorney or law firm that cannot perform other legal work for the county or elected officials, the position itself would still be selected through the county administration. And I think citizens should understand that structure, because the more authority concentrated into one ethics official, the more important questions of independence, accountability, transparency, and oversight become, especially if that person has the authority to determine whether complaints move forward before the ethics board itself ever becomes involved. But in Sandoval County's current process, the ethics board itself appears integrated into the process much earlier and more consistently. And honestly, that is one of the biggest reasons this proposed amendment caught my attention. These are the proposed changes. The proposed changes would significantly change that checks and balances structure. The proposed amendment, the contract compliance officer, would gain stronger gatekeeping authority during the early stages of the complaint process. The officer would review the complaint first and determine whether the allegations, if true, could constitute an ethics violation under the ordinance. And importantly, under the proposed structure, the compliance officer could dismiss the complaint before the ethics board ever becomes involved. This is the major structural shift. The ethics board becomes involved before final determinants are reached. That's how it was before, but with the proposal, the complaint can potentially end before the ethics board ever sees it. That is a very significant change in how the ethics system would operate. The proposal would also require complaints to be sworn and signed, eliminate anonymous complaints, make complaints public record, create election blackout periods for filing complaints against elected candidates. They have that in Rio Rancho as well, and increase coordination with the New Mexico State's Ethics Commission. Supporters may argue that these changes protect due process and are streamlined, reduce frivolous complaints, and prevent political weaponization. But critics may argue the proposal centralizes too much authority in one official weakens board-centered checks and balances, discourages whistleblowers, and creates the possibility that complaints could end before the ethics board ever reviews them. And honestly, what I find especially interesting is that Sandoval County appears to be taking two very different approaches to government structure at the same time. Recently, the county also proposed creating an independent salary commission to set salaries for county elected officials rather than commissioners directly setting their own salaries. That, and structurally, that proposal moves in the opposite direction of this ethics ordinance change. The salary commission proposed does a commission to look at the county commissioner's salary. In other words, it expands checks and balances and collaborative decision making. But with the proposed ethics ordinance changes, the county appears to be moving towards stronger gatekeeping authority concentrated into one compliance officer during the early stages of the ethics process. So I think it is fair for citizens to ask, why does one proposal move toward broader checks and balances while the other concentrates more authority into one official during the ethics review process? That's not necessarily an accusation, it's a governance question. And I think those are exactly the kinds of structural conversations informed citizens should be having. I also want you to know, if I didn't say this, the state of New Mexico in 2024, I guess, put a constitutional amendment on the ballot for all of New Mexicans to vote on. And here is what it says. Let me read it to you. In 2024, the voters, that's us, that's the residents of New Mexico, the voters approved a state constitutional amendment that transferred the authority to set county elected officials' salary from the New Mexico legislature to the commissions of each New Mexico county. The commission wishes to establish a public process to determine appropriate salaries for elected officials within Sandoval County without the appearance of a conflict of interest. So that's what we voted for. This is coming from the agenda summary from the Board of Commissioners. And what they're saying is they don't think that the county commissioners should be setting their own salaries. So they want to do away with that structure and have now a salary commission, like a board. I'm sure this is just going to be volunteer, a commission to set the salaries for the county commissioners. This is a constitutional amendment that the voters voted for. So now each county has to do this, okay? The ordinance would transfer the commission's authority to set elected officials' salary, including those of county commissioners, to the appointed salary commission. So it seems like the county commissioners are going like in two different directions. For the setting the salaries, they're having a commission, so it doesn't look like there's a conflict of interest. But then with the ethics complaint, there's one person, they want to change it to one person being the gatekeeper, the judge, and the jury, consolidating power. It just kind of seems weird. And ultimately, I think that is the larger public question here. Should governments balance due process, efficiency, and protection from frivolous complaints with transparency, public trust, checks and balances, and independent oversight? I believe the more people are involved in the process, the better it is for a representative republic. Checks and balances exist for a reason. No system is perfect. No person is perfect. That is why healthy government systems distribute authority across multiple people, multiple viewpoints, and multiple stages of review. Personally, I do not believe one person acting as the gatekeeper, investigator, decision maker, and effective judge and jury benefits the citizens. Because once that much authority is concentrated into individual into one individual, public trust in the process itself can begin to erode, even if that person is acting in good faith. And honestly, we already understand this principle in other areas of government. Can you imagine if only one county commissioner made all county decisions? Most people would immediately recognize the danger in concentrating that much authority into one person. Instead, we have boards, commissions, councils, hearings, debates, votes, and multiple layers of review because representative government is designed around shared authority and checks and balances. And I think ethics systems deserve the same thoughtful structure because ethics systems are not just about punishment. They are about public confidence, and they are about transparency. They are about whether citizens believe the process itself is fair, independent, and accountable. And whether you agree or disagree with this proposed ordinance, I believe these are conversations worth having because informed citizens matter, and I think you matter. So if you want to see what the county commission is doing about the ethics proposal, that's going to be June 10th. You can go to Sandoval County nm.gov, get some more information there. And they have May 27th, they're going to be, what are they going to do here? Let me go to the agenda, sorry. They are actually going to be approving a request for a motion to approve the publication of an ordinance creating the Sandoval County Elected Officials Salary Commission. And if I did read it right, they are going to get 5 people from each district, 5 people from each district to serve on this commission. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, the commission shall consist of 5 members to represent each of the 5 county commission districts. Okay, so they are making like a commissions to do this. I really like this. I think it's unethical for cities or counties to set their own pay scale. And I know the city of Rio Rancho gets away with it because the city councilors set their own pay raise. I don't know if you knew that or not. But they do it in such a way that says the next election cycle, your pay will go up. So it's not the current, right? If they vote on a pay raise, it actually doesn't kick in until the next term. But come on now. Most incumbents win 90% of the time. So I think to sit here and say that the salary doesn't kick in until the next election cycle is a little bit disingenuous, in my opinion. And then did you know that they also added an 8% cost of living increase in 2025 to the mayor's salary and to the city councilor's salary? They voted on that for themselves. Of course, it doesn't kick in until this next election cycle we had in March. All the sitting city councilors won because they're incumbents. So they're going to get an increase in pay. And then in 4 years, they're automatically going to get an 8% cost of living increase. I think that it would be very advantageous for the city of Rio Rancho to set up a commission independently to look at salaries and not staff and not the city councilors. So there you go. That was today's episode on Common Ground. Thank you for joining us. Bye.